Today, we'll look at how you can paint this zebra in watercolor. When you have a formula to follow and break it down into smaller parts, it's manageable and it's a lot of fun. This video will focus on how to paint the actual zebra, and I'll just quickly mention I did begin with a background, but it would look great if you would just keep it the white of the paper. To create the background, I first applied masking fluid around the edge of the zebra. After the masking fluid dried, I wet the paper and laid in thin layers of blue, red, and yellow, wet and wet. When the background is completely dry, remove the masking fluid and we're ready to move into the zebra. We'll only need a few colors. For the grays, blacks, and browns, I'll create mixes of French ultramarine blue and burnt umber. And for the yellow parts, I'm using Winsor lemon. You can learn how to mix these colors in the full tutorial inside our membership. I'm creating the painting on Osh 140-pound cold press watercolor paper. And now let's move into the zebra. I like to begin with the eyes. It creates the character. First, establish a pale gray map of what will be the darker lines and shapes. Winsor lemon will enhance the browns to come. Lay in the first layer of brown. I find it helpful at this point to reinforce what will be the darkest parts, the pupil, around the edges of the iris, and in the corners. I'll create the different browns in the iris. Typically, you see a darker value in the upper eye and around the edge. The lightest part is often in the lower iris. Next, we'll lay in the foundational colors, a pale map of the lightest colors. Break it down into smaller parts. Focus on one area at a time. I'm beginning with a pale gray map of where the stripes will be. This will help me to keep from getting lost, and we'll return 2 more times to go darker and create some fur and textures. Take your time, take breaks, and enjoy the process. We're focusing on the foundational colors. These are the lightest colors in preparation for the darks to come. I'll move into the area around the nose and mouth, laying in where the nostrils and the line of the mouth will be. I'll begin with a thin layer of burnt umber as the foundation for the darker colors to come. I'm laying in yellow as the foundational color for the forelock. This represents the lightest part of the forelock. This is the first layer of color in the mane. I'm using gray where the stripes will be. We're ready to move into darker values and refine color. Take your time going darker. Apply thin layers of color, drying between each layer. I'm focusing first on what will be the darkest parts. Then, areas that need to go a little darker, working around the lightest parts. Soften edges, creating smooth transitions from dark to not so dark to light. As we go darker, it's going to appear sloppy and uncomfortable. Keep moving forward. Layer by layer, it will come together. You'll find yourself repeating the same steps as you go darker. Revisit the darkest parts, then the midtones, then the lightest, drying between each layer. I'll move into the forelock, and I'm laying in a darker brown, hair-like applications with the tip of the brush. I'm laying in what will be the darkest part of the shape, creating hair-like applications. I'm thinking about creating a smooth transition from dark to not so dark to light. Let's revisit the stripes, applying another layer of gray to take them a little darker. Sometimes I'm laying in thin layers of color. At other times, hair-like markings. And this is not the darkest yet. We're going to come back in again. I'll move to the mane. Lay in a pale gray map of the length and the direction of the hairs. You could use your pointed round brush, or if you'd like to get the hair in more quickly, a comber brush is useful. In smaller areas, I like to use my smaller pointed round brush. And now I'm thinking about the darker stripes, laying in another layer of gray hair to take those shapes a little darker. And now for the darkest parts. I'm using a slightly thicker consistency of gray to create darker values. The base of each shape is the darkest. And I'm thinning the color higher. So little by little, it fades from very dark to not so dark to light. And now let's move into the ears. This is a brownish gray map of what will be the darker parts and the shapes in the ear. This is the edge of the lighter hair-like shapes, and that will serve as a guide as I next lay in the first thin layer of brown in the inner ear, and it's going around those lighter shapes. This is the first pale layer of hair or fur. I'm beginning to lay in where the darkest parts of the ear will be, and this will take several layers, applying the color around those lighter shapes. When dry, go back in and apply another layer in what will be the absolute darkest parts, thinning it outward, so we're transitioning from very dark to not so dark to light. Use thin layers of gray or pale brown to slightly smooth and refine the color. Or you could simply smooth with plain water in your damp brush. It will slightly soften those textures and it will help to unify everything. I'm thinking about the white parts. I think they're a little too pale. Let's create a thin layer of fur using pale gray. You could use your pointed round brush, or if you'd like to get the color in more quickly, use a comber brush. This is a Filbert grainer. It will produce the same results as a comber brush. This pale layer of gray fur is going everywhere that will be white. Presently, it's appearing a bit rough, but we're going to do some smoothing in just a moment. I'm going over the white parts with plain water and my damp brush. This is slightly smoothing, so the fur won't appear quite as rough. Let's return to the stripes, taking them darker, sometimes filling the stripes with color, sometimes creating hair-like markings. This is a slightly thicker consistency of gray. It's something like milk to thin cream, and it's creating a darker value. Moving into the larger stripes first, I'll use my medium-sized brush to fill them with another layer of gray. When dry, you can apply a layer of fur to create some texture. Multiple layers will help to create darker values. We've refined color and value everywhere in this zebra, and we're ready for final refinements. When you think the eye is finished, that's the time to create the eyelashes using the tip of the brush. I'm revisiting the stripes, laying in darker values to help create the impression of inward curve. And you can smooth with thinner consistencies of gray and the side of the brush. You can revisit and smooth the white parts with your slightly damp brush and plain water. Create hints of shadow with thin layers of gray, softening into the lighter parts. bring some hairs from the forelock overlapping over the ears. If you'd like to create lighter hairs, use a white product to do that, just a little bit of color on the brush. And there it is. I hope you found this video helpful and enjoyable. And if you'd like to learn more, I invite you to come over and explore our membership, where you can learn to paint this zebra and many other animals and people. Thanks for watching.